Good evening, Excellency ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia Global Dialogue or Southeast Asia TV. Tonight is a second part of the two-part series called Science for Development. And I have the pleasure to have with me Professor Rithy Chhem. And last week we spoke about why science, how do we promote science for development of our country, and we also have a glimpse a bit on the practice of other countries like Korea, like Japan, who have embraced science technology as part of the development strategy way back in for Japan over 100 years ago, and in the last 50 some year also in Korea. Today we're going to go on and we're going to focus more still science for development, but how do we advance science education in the context of Cambodia? So welcome once again, Professor.
Welcome.
Yes, good. So anyway, science for development, you need science, you know, but at the end of the day, you know, who's behind science is people. But how do you get to be a scientist? You got to go through education.
Yeah.
But in the case of Cambodia, we are coming a long way from a post-crisis country 20 years ago when everything was completely destroyed, social, financial, scientific infrastructure and everything. 20 years later, we are rebuilding slowly. Technology is coming back in the form of user-friendly toys and gadgets like iPad, iPhone, that sort of thing. But again, you know, I do not think that science education in Cambodia has the prominency as it should be yet. What's your assessment, having been back, you know, on and off for the last 20 years to Cambodia?
Thank you for this important question. First, I think that we don't start from zero.
Okay.
Like, in Phnom Penh, the Royal University of Phnom Penh has a established name already. You know, you have like good Department of Science for Science there.
Yes.
If I look at the website, you have physics, chemistry, biology, but it's a very limited area.
Okay.
And a small pool of trainees there.
Yes.
And you have also, I think, the Institute of Technology of Cambodia. But for a country of 15 million, I think that if you look at the number of graduates and the profile of graduates, you need more scientists, more technologists, and more engineers.
Yes.
So that's one thing. But for me, science starts in the family.
Okay.
Before kindergarten. It's culture, it's an attitude. You know, if you now, let's say Cambodia has no museum of science and technology.
Okay.
And I'm not surprised because, you know, with our history, we're not there yet. But maybe it will come one day.
Yeah.
But by default, the access through the internet, you know, you have a lot of science programs. There's zillions of science programs for kids, for example.
Yes.
So maybe parents should look at what their kids are doing. I see, say, at their, you know, in their home, they have iPad, they watch TV. If parents can guide them, you know, to that and tell them that, not tell them, but expose them to science program. There are plenty of science for kids, and then for older teenagers watching, you know, like all those popular science TV, like you know, this Discovery Channel, National Geographic, for example. I make I participate in a documentary on research on ancient skeleton Cambodia 10 years ago. So it starts by there, and then when they go to school, I'm pretty sure that they in the curriculum they have science program. I went to a local bookstore and browsed to the book that they have science book. But so that's important. The environment at home, at school, science must be maybe fostered and promoted. And in order to teach science, you need science teacher.
Yes.
And how many are involved in science teaching? And we can look at different models in the region. You know, from Singapore, it's always the best example for science technology teaching, because I've been there 5 years and actually contributed to some part of the effort to move life science to the next level, for example.
So science have to start from early phase. As any other field. I mean, you know, if you, I teach a lot, but not as a professional teacher, but at the university sharing conference, speech and everything. And I find that the difficulty in our, I would say, current generation of university students is that 10 years ago when they were still in the high school, they did not have that culture of reading. So when they go to university, they find that now they was given 300-page of book to read, they're struggling to read. So this is something I would say we have to stress from the early days, that read, and read. Because once you read, and then the material come later. And I also concur with you on the watching the Discovery Channel. My son is 11 years old, he's writing books already, but I would say that he watched, you know, all the program of Discovery Channel, and after a while he started to see, oh, that's what it meant. But moving from the early childhood, you know, impression and influencing on their reading, and then you're moving to the next step, which is at the university level. What sort of curriculum you think, you know, Cambodian university should adopt?
So, you know, that higher education is fundamental, but the quality of the curriculum and how curriculum is absorbed by the students depend on their background. Come from high school. So at each level you have to go down to fix, because so the foundation is in elementary school, and then go to secondary school. If the science at the end of grade 12, your level of math, physics, chemistry and biology is not strong, then it's a kind of more like a damage control at the university level.
I see.
You know? But this has been said, there are some exceptional students. If you look at the bell curve, the +1 standard deviation, they learn by themselves. You know, you have access. Let me mention one thing. I don't know if you have heard about the Khan Academy, Khan. He's producing YouTube teaching in math, physics, chemistry and biology, for example, for a high school student and even for junior school at the university. If a young Cambodian who has a good grasp on English just take the curriculum from the Khan Academy, he's qualified to go to any university abroad. So that's one thing that is if you have something that is missing. But this has been said. I think the foundation, the message is that certainly I'm pretty sure that the government is looking at that, is to strengthen science education at all levels. Because you cannot fix science education at university level if they graduate from high school are not up to the level. And it's important to invest in science. The message is that invest in science education and promoting, you know, on TV, promoting the value of science and enhancing the image of a science teacher also is important.
I see what's happening in Cambodia now is a sort of slow shift from the appreciation that university is good, but you know, you train people to be an economist, an accountant, a manager, you know, the soft business skill there. But over time, in the last 4 or 5 years, you end up producing more people with that social skill, business, economic skill that have no job. So in recent years, there's a clear appreciation that, oh my God, if I graduate after 4 years and I have skill that cannot be used in the industry, what's the purpose? So now people start to realize maybe I should not just focus on going to university, get an economic degree, but maybe I should look at more in the vocational skill. But the problem in Cambodia, when you think of vocational and technical skill, it is not appealing because, oh my God, my hands are going to get dirty, right? But don't you think that it is a first step toward, you know, moving up the science technology ladder?
There's no question. Again, it's about cultural shift. You know? Engineers, scientists, technologists, by their profession, if they can create an industry, a factory of work there, they are the one who create wealth. There's nothing wrong to have managers and accounting, but in order to get you need something to manage. You need substance. And accounting, you don't create wealth by doing accounting, but they are managing the wealth. But in order to get there, you know, from my perspective as a non-economist, but as academics, the engineers, when they build infrastructure, when they build road, they build bridge, they build factory, they build hospital, they contribute to the real production of wealth. You know? So that's important. So the curriculum you asked me is certainly is to increase the probably classes or courses of science or science degree. But as I mentioned to you, science degree need investment. Much more investment than you need law school, with due respect to you as a lawyer.
Yes, okay.
But investment, but the mindset of probably university leaders, particularly for the non-profit, is that it's a cost.
Yes.
But if you look at investment and look at science education as a cost, the future is not bright.
Yes.
Because it's investment.
Yes.
Yeah, it's something that is positive. So how to change that is one thing. The next step, for example, is that once you have the science curriculum in place that is effective, done by experts, you need science teacher.
Yes.
You need science professor.
Okay.
Where do they get them?
Yes.
I know, I've heard that they are limited here. So you need to hire them from abroad.
Yes.
So there's a price
Exposure,
to pay.
yeah.
And then the next step is that not only you need a curriculum that is proper for university, the curriculum must reflect the needs of the market,
Yes.
the job.
Yes.
So the link between university industry is very important. So you need leadership at the university, and they need to engage industry, and the government as a policymaker should find a way, set up a policy that is effective, that allowed this free flow of information and a strong communication, a strong collaboration between the government, policymaker, the industry, and the academics. It has been proven, for example, that faculty members, teachers at the university, from engineers, for example, or from the enterprise, private enterprise, that they become better teacher in terms of providing the real marketable skill to the students. So you need two sources of from the pool of teacher. The teacher who are totally academics, but you need also practitioners to teach for that.
Yeah.
So this triangle, policymaker.
Yeah. So the clear role of the private sector, the industry, to be part of that process.
Very clear, because if not, how can I've been a professor for 25 years.
Yes.
If we don't talk to the industry, what we do is not relevant.
Yes.
Just to give you a practical example, I'm a radiologist, so very high-tech specialty in medicine. People who like physics, like math, like technology, go to that specialty. If not, they won't go there. And as a chair of the Department of Radiology Nuclear Medicine in Canada, we work closely. We have lab research. In my department, we have like 300 investigators doing advanced research in medical imaging. But we engage the industry. We work with different companies. I will not disclose the name here.
Yes, yes.
But they tell us, we consult them on how to improve the technology. As a doctor, I work in a hospital. From my practice, I know what is missing to improve the life of my patient. I talk to my scientists and look, I need this here. And so what they do in the lab is relevant to the needs of a doctor. But once they do that, they need to produce that at the industrial level. So it's a kind of triangle that and information must flow very freely. It's a circulation of knowledge with that. And again, the more knowledge you produce, in the medical field, for example, the more medical scientists you have, the more knowledge you produce, and the better the country will benefit.
In the case of Cambodia, where that sector is still emerging, we see private medical practitioners are investing into their own equipment, that sort of thing. Do you see the relevance of having a much more organized, say, medical practitioner, for example, into a form of association that can stimulate that sort of awareness, and be providing the input to the government so that they can further the policy development that side?
I know that there is a national medical association in Cambodia. I know that there is also the Academy of a branch of the Royal Academy that have a medical science, so that I don't know how much they interact with that.
Yes.
But there is no question that a government need a kind of a scientific advisor at the highest level, somebody who's qualified, practitioner of science, experience in academia, and policymaker at the global scale, because science is not national. It goes across the border. And an example is that science advisor existed for a long time for developed country. Recently I met, for example, the scientists working at the Office of Science and Technology at the White House. Or in the UK recently they have a change of leadership of what they call a CSA, Chief Scientific Advisor. And the last 15 years that the scientists, high-level scientists, qualified and recognized, have been advising the British government. They found that this kind of advisory information is important.
Yes.
So they try to push to another level that at each ministry they have a science advisor also. So, but at the national level, you need a chief scientific advisor in order to have a clear vision about what is science technology and advise the government.
Science is so cross-cutting.
Yeah.
I would say you're speaking at the very high level, a policy orientation, the priority, the focus. But at different sectoral level, you know, agriculture, telecom, you know, industry, your science spread everywhere, right? How do you coordinate that? I mean, because science is more than just one thing. You know, it has so many different ramifications.
Yeah. And you're right.
How do we get a national focus to encompass all this science technology
I think that
thing?
national level, and there are two dimensions to that.
Yes.
First, you know, the science is done by scientists.
Yes.
And in science, you cannot pretend. You know.
Okay.
You need to know.
Yes.
You need to be qualified.
Yes.
And recognized by colleagues.
Yes.
We call that peer recognition. So you cannot pretend that you're a scientist.
Yeah.
Somebody will look at your paper.
Yes.
And you are measured objectively. You
Yeah.
cannot say I'm a scientist.
Yes,
Like
yes.
people say it.
Yes.
By your production. That's one thing. So science, they have a professional or learned organization. Those people, they work to advance science, to advance their profession, and at the same time their leadership will connect with the government, with regulatory bodies, or with the government to provide some information should they be asked. But in developed country, they sit on the board of many organization, whether non-profit or non-profit. Science has a role across the board. And now the other dimension is that you need a structure. And in many countries they call that the Office of Science and Technology.
Okay.
But the Office of Science and Technology can be a national authority or can be a Ministry of Science and Technology.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And for example, in ASEAN country, to my knowledge, I think, for example, Cambodia has no Ministry of Science and Technology yet.
Yes.
And we're about to embrace knowledge economy. So there's maybe a gap, something there, or you need a channel where scientists, qualified scientists who understand not only the science, but the connection with science and society and the economy in order to provide information, to inform, we say that. Because if you look at that, science is important not only to produce wealth, but science as a methodology, because policy, a sound policy should be established on a scientific method, you know, observation, verification. If policy in any field, in trade, policy, in environment, is not based on science, it hardly become effective.
Yes.
But certainly, as a scientist, I understand working in a big kind of organization from the UN family, we realize that also there are other dimensions to policy making. The science is necessary but not sufficient because you have other considerations also.
Yes.
So in some, you need to have a science advisory to support policy in any fields.
Well, I think in the recent years that Cambodia has entered the WTO, where growth is, climbing steadily, the community is getting, when I mean community, I mean by the ASEAN economic communities is about to be materialized. You see a lot of private sector coming to Cambodia, I mean larger company, and with them they bring a certain standard that they require. Unfortunately, you know, our labor force are not qualified there yet. So what I see is one of the best practice done by the private sector themselves is that the Japanese company would actually be bringing batch of Cambodian, you know, sort of like staff to train them, and then it's a roll down effect, right? So are the Korean, for example. I think these are the two countries that are bringing technology to the marketplace and helping build the capacity of the local to climb up, right? So in that sense, I'm quite optimistic that in the future, with a combination of a clear policy orientation where we stress that, okay, you know, Vision 2030, science technology is there. At the same time, bearing in mind that Cambodia is still a least developed country, resource from the budget, from the Ministry of Finance is not a lot, because you're fighting with education, with fighting malaria, you know, and everything else. So, you know, how do we strike a public-private academic partnership? Here, these are the three, you know, triangular relation that you have stressed before. What's your advice on that one?
So first, you know, you said that certainly a low-income country has many priorities.
Yes.
But maybe science technology brings solution to that.
Okay.
The best solution, you know, how to find a way to tackle communicable disease, non-communicable disease, water management with limited resources, how to be more effective. Maybe you can find solution, a much cheaper solution to solve the problem.
That's a good point. Because, you know, when you start from scratch, you are not bound by existing constraints. You have, if I can take something as simple as I went to a nearby, you know, quite developing ASEAN country, and I find when I walk to their government building, or even some company, they are still using the old computer of 10, 15 years ago. So I asked him, geez, I mean, your country are so advanced, but why you're still using all this computer? Because they say, well, it's still usable, right? So we still haven't fully amortized. But in the case of Cambodia, because we start from scratch, there's no old technology for us to wait until it got, you know, depleted. So we buy a new one, we import a new one.
I'm a historian, and you look at history tell you that creativity comes from crisis.
Yes.
From the needs.
Yes.
And if you have no resources, you are left with only one thing.
Yes.
The brain.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you allow the brain, you know, a free expression of the brain in terms of science, and there's a lot of creativity that come out. You know, because if you have everything, maybe we rely too much on technology.
Yes, exactly.
So I believe, you know, I talk to many students, I interact with many students in Cambodia. They are very bright. What they need is a fertile soil to grow. You know? And science is so exciting. You know, it's so important. All my life I've been doing science. Even now I'm still and lifelong learning. You keep on learning, and without science, it's difficult. My life, everything is done certainly with the other dimension, the culture, religion, belief, you know. But the scientific method, it's so exciting that I spend my life studying history, looking at different models. And coming to policy, you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Yes, exactly.
You know? Policy for science technology, they are everywhere. I read recently a report from the American Association for Advancement of Science. They did that for Haiti after the earthquake 2 years ago. And actually it's just, you can summarize that in 3 points. If you want to promote, you want science technology to boost the economy, number one, you need to advance science, and we discuss about that. Number two is to advance science education, and number three is how to govern science to make it more effective, funding, regulation, etc., with a support from policymakers and with the support from the industry and the market also.
Professor, we again coming to the end of our program, but let me just say that Cambodia has been exposed quite a bit in the last 20 years of different form of science, right? And if you go around town now, I mean, you having coming back to Cambodia so many times the last 20 years, so you see a major change in the city, for example. You see the architectural design, for example, you know, many of new building, it looks nice, and you'd be surprised that, you know, behind that there are some form of science, because when you have young architects using CAD/CAM to design 3D dimensional, you know, blueprint, that sort of thing. These are the first stage evolving into a much more sophisticated. We have now young software engineer now, Microsoft, Oracle, they're all Apple, they're all offering specialized course to be qualified as their sort of like their software engineer. So I think in a way we have the element, you know, there. What we need now is to intensify that pace in a form of a very clear-cut policy orientation, and then at the operation level move to mobilize the private industry actor to put together this whole system. But I could wrap up by saying that at the end of the day, but luckily this is a culture that we have already, give respect to science teacher, to science professor. And this is something that I probably would remember from our talk with you today. But your last word.
I think you mentioned intensified. You have young brains here. I think the wealth of Cambodia is young population. Not only intensify in IT, for example, but diversified.
Yes.
Let's not forget the neglected field of science, chemistry, and mathematics. If we can consider that, teaching mathematics doesn't cost much. And chemistry, for oil industry, you need chemical engineers, for example. So my last word is that if a society values scientists and values science, children will be excited, and we should start in the family. Science is fun, science is useful for society, it will improve the quality of life and will boost our economy, and also at the end, to compete at the global level and also the prestige of the country. Science technology development has allowed Japan and Korea to be where they are now. That's my last word.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much for coming and share with us your broad experience and exposure from a scientific academic, but at the same time as a practitioner, and foremost being a Cambodian by birth, and having seen all this development in our country for the last 50, 60 years, some years. You can see the whole picture, the spectrum where Cambodia was, and then later on the gap, and then now the reconstruction, redevelopment. But from this point onward, the intensification, and probably, in next 10 years, skipping the learning curve, the quantum leap. So I thank you for that one. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
it's been a pleasure.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now wrapping up a two-part series of dialogue about science and development. We have touched a subject that has not been much covered in the last 2 years since I had the show. But I must say that as we are moving forward toward integrating our economy into the ASEAN Economic Community, 10 years ago we were brought into the WTO. The world is getting more and more globalized. The world is getting more and more competitive. We're so interdependent. And there are a lot of things that we can benefit from it. Entering the ASEAN Economic Community will force us to adhere to a very high level of standard setting in many different fields in the area of science, in development, in standard, in food safety. All these things require science behind. All these things require that when the government or the parliament ratifies certain, agreement with ASEAN, say for example on food safety, say for example on, cosmetic, on drugs, it required our Cambodian national who work in various agencies to be technically and scientifically qualified. If not, how are we going to measure, how are we going to gauge that these product, this medication, this cosmetic, this food are soy sauce. To take a very simple example, soy sauce,ទឹកត្រី,ទឹកស្អៀវ,ទឹកម្ទេស. All these are stuff that we eat every day. If we do not have the scientific way to ensure that it's safe, we are not helping our country, we're not helping the welfare of our people. But it all starts with the appreciation from the early days of science, And here what Professor Chhem Rithy has stressed from beginning, start early, start young, get your kid, to, of course, use the iPad, but steer them to learn more about science. Watch more TV on Discovery Channel. So on that note, have a good reading tonight.